So when we look at the James Webb, it's out at L2, or it's not in a low Earth orbit like Hubble. Compare the risk to James Webb as compared to Hubble. James Webb has a huge surface area, and it's mostly going to be impacted by micrometeoroids, not really a lot of orbital debris out there. And most of its surface area is the sun shield, I believe, or the reflector. And most impacts aren't probably going to do a lot of damage. We find that in different ISS. We know ISS, the solar arrays and the radiator panels get hit often. And that really doesn't cause a lot of damage because it's just going through some surface area in a very small area. Hubble is in orbit around 600 kilometers, which is where you have more of an orbital debris risk. It's not as high an orbital debris risk as around 800 kilometers or so, which is where that peak is, but it's going to be a lot more dangerous than James Webb, which doesn't really have any orbital debris risk. And we've seen a lot of impacts to Hubble. There haven't really been any failures associated with Hubble impacts, but we've seen holes in the solar panels. I believe a solar array was brought down from Hubble a few years ago, and we saw several impacts in there. But an impact without a failure it's not really the concern. The concern, and when we do our risk assessments, we're concerned with failures as opposed to impacts. So we have to know what our failure criteria are to know if we're at risk for one of those impacts causing a failure. So far you can say we've been lucky with Hubble, and or it's just not enough debris to hit one of the vital components in a vital area for Hubble. One thing that's interesting, the international community has taken notice of this issue of orbital debris, and there are different ways of mitigating the orbital debris from a overall standpoint. And over the years, different guidelines have been put into effect, such as there's a 25-year rule, which is a guideline which says if you put a satellite in orbit, make sure it doesn't stay up there for more than 25 years. Make sure it gets out of the way and doesn't become a source of orbital debris. There's passivation requirements, which means if you have a satellite or even an upper stage for a launch vehicle, if it's going to be in orbit, try to remove the energy from that spacecraft by bleeding down any pressurized tanks, discharging any batteries, anything that could blow up and cause a cloud of orbital debris. And there are also studies on sending spacecraft up to old orbiting satellites and either bringing them down or sometimes resurfacing them, putting more propellant in them so that they can deorbit themselves. So I think it's very important, and it's encouraging that the different spacefaring nations and communities are addressing this and trying to do something. There are also more exotic ideas about removing orbital debris that may be not as practical, like there's one ground-based laser beams that would focus on pieces of orbital debris and change their orbits enough so that they come down. Other giant vacuum cleaners, but I think right now concentrating on removing the big pieces of orbital debris, the spacecraft, and designing missions so that they take themselves out of the way is a big step in helping reduce the orbital debris problem.